Hello, and welcome back to the Scuttlebutt VR, the least formal VR podcast on the internet. I'm Theron, joined as always by my host, or co-host, Hermes Auslander. And you might have noticed something's a little bit different about me and the way that I look. Got a custom avatar, baby. If you haven't already seen the YouTube short, here's the official debut of the Theron Scuttlebutt VR avatar. Got the hoodie. Got a nice little scannable QR code here. You know, I still look like an anime boy. Ooh-woo. So,
fingerless
yeah,
gloves and everything.
Checking all the bases. So, yeah, that's like we talked about off air. The fingerless gloves, I couldn't figure out how to get the textures to go away. And it was easier to just go back to the 80s than to fucking figure it out. So, this is only the first iteration of our Scuttlebutt avatar. As you were saying, we need to get a sweatshirt for you now. So this is always going to be a work in progress, but hey, learn some Blender, learn some Unity. Big shout out to that YouTuber whose name I'm going to put right here because I can't remember it. Virtual Panda. His tutorials were awesome. How are you doing today, buddy?
Panda.
It's been a while. You've been gone.
It has. I've been gone even more than I expect to be gone, and I'll be gone again this coming up weekend as well. So it doesn't end, but I'm here. We're making it work any way we can. Uncle Sam is going to get his time. I muted myself. Get his time out of me.
For any of our watchers, who don't know, Hermes is actually active duty military. He's currently stationed at Area 51 in Roswell. So
There we go.
That's that kind of. We're going to use that as an excuse for why we suck at updating or uploading things. You know, it's not because we're poor at scheduling. Well, but on YouTube though, we're still catching up on YouTube.
Not.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Meta. Meta's been in the news a lot. It's been all over the place. The first thing, you've been gone so long, I can't wait to hear your take on this. The prices on the headsets are going up on the Quest 2s. So the 128 and the 256 are both $100 more than when you and I bought them.
Which is wild.
It's the same thing. And to be fair, they are giving you Beat Saber for free until December. But that's a $30 game. It's a $100 increase. So it's still effectively a $70 increase over what's the same hardware. It's great for us, though. You know, Project Cambria is supposed to be coming out soon, and so, like, we were just talking about the resale value just kind of went up for us. Like, for people who bought in early, we're actually, for the first time, I think, ever in tech history that I could remember, people who bought in early aren't getting screwed. Well, except for the Oculus, except for the Quest 1. We're ignoring the Quest 1. You guys got screwed pretty bad.
Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, we have made a $20 to $50 profit at minimum. If it went up $100, we can sell it $50 cheaper than the brand newest one, and people are so they're getting a cheaper version. We're making a profit still. Resale value, like you said, totally went up. Did you see Apple just did filed their patents for AR and VR headsets?
I mean, they've filed a lot of stuff, but like they've also filed a ton of patents for things that have never like come out yet either.
Yet is the key word.
They said
out.
Early 2023, so it's going to be interesting. Or you're talking about the car. I'm talking about the VR.
I just meant they filed patents for things that never, made it to market.
That's true. And the car is a good example. Speaking of things that are almost to market, though, we both watched Mark Zuckerberg's recent podcast interview in a studio not so different from this, plus a nice, Jamie.
Yeah.
But they were talking about all kinds of things in the metaverse and with Project Cambria. They said it's supposed to be coming out next month in October. Like, what do you think about that? They just kind of dropped the release date. No marketing, nothing. Just Marky Mark talking on the podcast.
Well, I thought that beginning portion of the discussion, specifically around VR, I was like, yeah, yeah, Joe, welcome to what the Scuttlebutt has been doing for like the last year. No big deal. Not
Yeah,
gonna stroke anybody's ego here, but
what if you could have a
welcome.
virtual podcast?
I was like, well, welcome. And then, so all joking aside, though, I was loving the fact that a lot of the conversation, surprisingly, I wasn't lost. I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I was. What we've talked about, what I've thought about when it comes to VR as it relates to like, both real world applications and value, and then as it relates to where the technology is going in the future. So I thought the whole conversation was a very good introduction for those. I mean, obviously Rogan has like a big audience base, so I don't know exactly everybody in his audience, but I assume not everybody in his audience was at the same level listening to that. So I thought it was a good introduction for those uninitiated, who are like, oh yeah, look at that. VR is becoming more and more mainstream, as Rogan is pointing out his interest in it, Zuckerberg explaining a lot of his motivations for why he would be into it and why he's putting billions of dollars into it. It all sort of like leveled out the playing field for the casual uninitiated. So I was like, great, that's awesome. Again, for the early adopters, it's nothing but good news and promising. Exactly. Everything's going up. It's just promising for us. So I was excited.
And I actually couldn't agree with you more. That was my biggest takeaway listening to specifically the part about virtual reality, is that I've talked a lot of shit about Mark Zuckerberg. I know plenty of us have, with him co-opting the metaverse and taking stuff over. But when he was sitting there describing what he wants for VR and the metaverse, it's the same thing that we want. It's like a lot of our things. He really is kind of like an enthusiast. It would seem, it's not like you said, they're losing a ton of money on the front end. So it's not just a money hungry business decision. Like he was talking about how nerve wracking it is to have to like keep talking to these shareholders that he's just losing their money left and right and being like, trust me, it's still a good investment. I was impressed by the whole interview, to be honest. Like, they clearly gave the Mark Zuckerberg AI an upgrade. Like, that is the most human-like I have ever seen him. Like,
well, maybe Rogan had a little. What's it? Little. That just looks like I'm.
We'll blur it out. We'll blur it out.
Substance influence, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, that's at one point he had him. He's like, drink some of that water. Rogan made him. He's like, drink, and. But they were talking, I guess Rogan actually got to use the Cambria prototype, it sounded like, because they were talking about, a fencing game or something, which is actually really cool. I'm super excited for that. When they also kind of just mentioned that offhand, and I don't know if you know, but there aren't any really good 2-person sword fighting games in VR right now. And the real reasoning for that is that, there's no like collision. That, things can just pass through each other, all kinds of funky weird. And so there's no way for swords to actually like clash in the middle effectively for both parties. And so when they were talking about how they have a fencing game that they played, and Joe thought it was good and Mark seemed excited about it, like, I want to know more about that game, because to me, that's handling some technical limitations that prior to this, I wouldn't really know how to solve. The best way that I've seen it done, and I can't remember the name of the game, but it was more like lightsabers. And when the beams would collide, they would go like all wiggly and they wouldn't do damage. So it was much more about like trying to work around each other's blades than actually clashing. And so, I'm super excited. Obviously with fencing, it's not like big old broadswords or anything, but step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was another part of technology going forward that I thought was really exciting that Zuck was talking about, was his interest in full immersion, where he was talking about, Rogan had commented on like the eye tracking for Cambria, but he was like, we're already working on the gloves, we're already working on like suits and sleeves and all of this sensation and what it actually means for the brain. So it's, again, to the point of, he seems like an enthusiast. It does seem like he's gone to the lengths and taken the necessary steps to understand what's necessary for the brain to process at this point. Right now it's all visually based, and he was like, visually speaking, just visually, like you don't really need the whole arm, you just need the hand. Your brain
That
is
part
able to
was
accept
shocking to me. For anyone who
Right.
hadn't seen the podcast, he pointed out that a lot of the reason in Facebook apps like Horizons you don't have arms and elbows is because it's easier to just track the hands. And what they found in short is that your brain is comfortable with just having hands, or more comfortable than it is with having elbows in the wrong places, or legs that don't match up with where your real legs are. And that, it makes perfect sense when you say it out loud, but I had never considered it beforehand. And that was super enlightening, because I think it's like, oh, Facebook's just fucking with stuff because they don't know what they're doing. They're like, let's just do it this way and try it. But no, there really is a huge amount of thought and testing and practice. I think they have more than a dozen different VR prototypes that they're working on right now, and they're all focused on like different things. Like you said, one of them is really big on full body tracking, and then another one has like a super high resolution screen. And so they're running all of these lines concurrently to see which features are going to make it into the future headsets. And we're about to see that with Project Cambria. A lot of people are thinking it might be called the Quest Pro. I'm curious if they're going to stick with that Quest name or try something else. I think it might be better to move away from Quest, just because that was another thing that stuck out to me talking to Joe Rogan, is that the whole rebranding from Oculus thing is not working for them. I think Joe said Oculus like 6 times when he was talking about their new products, maybe more. And every time you could see Mark would like cringe a little bit. He would never correct him, or if he did, he would just kind of like gently do it through what he was saying. But you could tell that it was like every time it was just that one more mark on like, you really shouldn't have changed that name. There was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Well, and to the point of it seems like Meta, Facebook, Oculus, whatever the fuck the name ends up being, seems like, yes, they're putting in the necessary effort. So I think we've even discussed this briefly in the past. It's like, I'm glad that there is at least one company doing it, and post interview, I'm actually kind of glad that it's somebody who's that enthusiastic about it, and who is, like, I almost trust them. Like, it's like, you're not going to hear me say I trust Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg in the same sentence ever. But
very often,
in this instant, it's like, no, I kind of feel a little relieved in that. Again, maybe the AI had a little update for the Zuck AI, but it was convincing enough to me where I was like, I'm actually kind of glad that it is you doing this right now. If anybody is going to take the steps necessary, it sounds like you are the person to take those steps. So, that being said, when it comes to like the name and everything, I think there probably was a reason, and whatever, marketing or data,
absolutely.
A collection that there was some reasoning that they were like, hey, let's move away from Oculus for whatever polling reason that we want to, and move it into Quest, or let's change Quest into Meta. I'm sure there was a reason.
Was it a good reason?
Having said that, I think maybe Mark being one thing I did pick up from the interview is that he seems to like to be that final say of control. And I think that kind of narrows part of it, because he even admitted, part of like, the things that he allows on the platform or doesn't allow on the platform is because of this reason. And I was sitting there
and it's
thinking,
super
like,
arbitrary too. Like, it's because we want to make people happy.
Shares that reason. It's like, happy based on your definition of what that means, or your, interpretation of what that means. So again, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with what he specifically has envisioned, because again, I kind of trust most of what he's got envisioned, but I do think because he also wants and needs to be the final say, that he's getting, and we're seeing examples of this narrow vision ideas, similar to how Apple and Steve Jobs, had issues in the past. Like, it's hard to work with somebody like that, and it's hard to innovate if they are struggling in one of those fashions, or one of, and it also like doesn't have as much inclusion as it could have if it wasn't the case, So I think the interview was eye-opening in a lot of fashions, both positive and negative. When it comes, the negative aspect, I would say, certainly when it comes to like the name change, like you and I, and it sounds like Rogan agrees, was unnecessary. even if it had some crazy reason that Zuck, found or the team found or whatever, at the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter enough to change it. And the fact that he decided to change it and is the final say to change it, we're seeing now part of this fallout. So if he can overcome that kind of a obstacle and hurdle, I think overall, the VR space will benefit from that a lot more.
Absolutely. And I think that's just one of the many kind of hurdles. And none of them are particularly large, but they all build up on each other. And him having to be the final say and doing that stuff is absolutely as helpful as it is harmful sometimes. And I think relating it to Steve Jobs is really good, because just like Steve Jobs, he also has definitely an ego, and he doesn't like to be wrong. Just very recently, I don't know if you saw it, but Meta Horizons, their version of, what we're in right now, a social platform, is they just expanded to Spain and France. Which, first of all, what do you mean expanded? I thought the whole point was that it's everywhere. Here we have friends from Japan, we have friends from Germany. We talk to people all over the world because our podcast is listened to all over the world. That just makes sense. And so the whole country gating thing that's not even the issue that everyone's talking about, but it bugs me personally. What everyone is talking about is he tweeted a picture, and it was a selfie of him with an Eiffel Tower and another building from Spain in the background, and it looked god-awful. Bad. Bad PS2 game. Not even the gems, but just there was no shading. His avatar looked really flat. It's the normal meta ones. People tore it up. Within 24 hours, every fucking journalist was the metaverse is dying, and here's why. Look at how terrible these graphics are. Nobody wants to spend time in here, and there's not even trees in the background. Shit. Legend of Zelda on the Nintendo 64 had trees, at least. Within that 24-hour period, he posted another picture that is it's a picture of his avatar. It's probably the most human that Mark Zuckerberg has ever looked in his entire life in this cartoon drawing. And it looks way better. It's better, but it's not real. It's a render. It's oh, this is where we're going. And the reality is that he was really proud of what he did, and then everyone shit all over it. And so he had someone, oh, you got to fix that right now. And that's the kind of impulsiveness that comes from that ego problem that is not helpful.
Exactly. Yeah. And similar to, we grew up a good portion of our at least teenage years. We're not new to the internet. We know how it works. So part of that is I love that that Zuck continues to give the fuel to the flame in some of these respects. And I think part of the harm, if he can figure it out, it can be part of his advantage. Because it's that saying of any publicity is good publicity, right? So it's we're talking about Meta.
Unless you freak out about it. Because that's what he did.
Even
exactly what you're saying. They did the article trashing him, and so he freaked out, got another picture up, and then they did an article trashing how fast he did that. It's you can't win.
At the end of the day, no, you can't, exactly. And hopefully the fuel that because I do think part of his personality and part of who he is just going to be fuel, and haters are going to hate regardless. Everybody on the internet knows that to be a fact. But him being him, I think, adds just that bit of fuel that I enjoy seeing happen. And hopefully he can just figure out how to then just keep it there. Just his normal personality, his normal robotic self is going to be fuel. And if you leave it there and don't respond the very next day with, oh my gosh, no, it's so much better. Even if it is, and even if this is an example of the difference between Quest 2 and Cambria, leave it there, leave it behind the scenes, and move on. Shut up.
Right, actions speak louder than words. That's what they say, right? So instead of if everyone's saying that it looks bad, and you put out a render, just basically a drawing of what it's gonna look like in the future, just keep your head down, make it look good, and then invite all those journalists to your press event where you're releasing it and it looks way better. That's exactly how you get ahead in the tech world. You got to just keep your nose down and keep going. And of course, they've made billions of dollars at it, and I haven't made shit. So they should probably take my advice. I'm open if they need anything.
Exactly. Exactly what I was thinking just now. I was like, you know what, Zuck? I know you're going to see this, so therefore, when you see it, helpful hint for you. Right here. There's our 2 cents. Scuttlebutt Podcast.
I kind of learned how to do avatar building, so I could help make your avatar look better. Oh, that's ridiculous.
More weebish, right?
That's the key. Nobody wants to admit it, but everyone just wants to be anime girls. Like, it's okay, America. You can admit it. Like,
it's there's a reason 1 billion people have adopted the look. It's not a coincidence.
Speaking of anime girls and kind of tangenting off a little bit here, did you watch the documentary on HBO that's called We Met in Virtual Reality?
No.
Oh, it's interesting.
Recently.
Oh, well, fair enough. Fair enough. What, just DC's not doing anything for you?
It was actually that House of Dragons thing. The wife really wanted to watch it because she was like, I mean, we both love Game of Thrones, so I was like, I don't think it's going to be good, babe. Like, everything I've been seeing and hearing and reading about does not
the
look
end of
good.
Game of Thrones, it's not good.
Yeah, and it's the prequels, so I was just like,
no,
look,
but
babe,
chronologically,
like,
they made it
right?
after. They already were flushing it down the toilet, and then they started doing this.
Yeah, and so, long story short, she gave it a chance. We couldn't even finish, like, I think we barely finished the first one, and we both agreed, like, yep, this isn't worth it. Cancel HBO.
I don't even care. I'm canceling the whole service over this. You guys, you made me angry. It's a good documentary.
It never works.
I don't know that I would recommend getting HBO Max just to watch this documentary, though. Like, it's good. I guess it won some awards at the Sunset Film Festival. So that's cool.
Yeah, then that means my buddy Swim could grab it at some point off of something that's not HBO.
Exactly. And that it's good. It should be called We Met in VRchat, because the entire thing is filmed inside of VRchat, which is super cool. It's a feature-length documentary doing the same thing we do here in the podcast, but it didn't turn out as good as I was hoping. Like, it was great for what it was, but there were some small improvements that could have been made. I'm glad that it was made, and I'm glad that, HBO picked it up for streaming. That's a huge W.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope we see more stuff like that in the future, but it would have been nice if they addressed stuff in all of virtual reality, or kind of just cover. It had a very narrow scope, is how I felt about it.
Yeah, and we're seeing, but again, to your point, like, I'm glad that there are these first steps, because more than likely a lot of these first steps are going to be narrow so that they're accessible. And as time goes on, there's going to be a wider and wider audience, a bigger and bigger scope, I'm sure, as time goes on. So I'm just glad at least these steps are happening, because, hey, HBO, you want somebody to do it right and give you a full-length feature documentary that will be, actually up to snuff in the full scope of things in VR?
Well, and it is. I'm not trying to shit talk the work that he put together, because they put everything together and then took it around to the shows, and then HBO picked it up. So they didn't have any money in the production at all. They did it all with PC VR. I'd say that was probably my biggest criticism of it, is they basically were showing it like, hey, buy VR. This is what it looks like. But they weren't mentioning that you actually need like a crazy high powered computer and a bunch of other stuff. Like, I was watching it with my wife, and there were several times where she's like, is that what it looks like inside of the Quest 2? And no, absolutely not. I'm not even allowed in those worlds. My stuff is so weak. And so it would have been nice if they kind of at least established that in the beginning of like, hey, this is literally the absolute peak and pinnacle graphically of what VR can be right now. Which, of course, that's what you want to show people. But even then, if that's not accessible for people, and you're making it seem like everyone can just hop in and do this, I think you're actually going to be turning away more people than you're actually going to get involved long term.
Exactly.
Especially since even at its highest graphical fidelity, like, the girl's tit was still jiggling through her arm half the time and stuff. Like, it was a great documentary. It was probably the lowest production quality documentary that I've seen in quite a while. And I don't mean that to be negative. It just is what it is, given the physics engine that you were making it inside of.
Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, are we not the kings of the lowest budget possible for creation?
That's true. I wanted a custom avatar, and I shopped out a bunch of quotes, and then I said, there is no way I'm paying that much money. I have to be able to figure this out on my own. And here we are today with fingerless gloves. So that's what free gets you.
Well, I think again, we've said this a million times. It's not about the art tool. It's not about the pencil or the pen or the marker. It's about the one wielding it.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. You know, I think we both agree, strangely enough, that I actually feel a little bit excited that Mark Zuckerberg is the one wielding the pen of virtual reality at this moment. You know, I'll take a second and thank everyone for watching to the end of the video. You know, we appreciate you guys for hanging out with us here at Scuttlebutt VR. This also has been free for you, so you probably got what you paid for. Thanks for watching.